cooking party with me, Lillian, and my dad, Marty.
And today we're making macaroni and cheese. We're making a double batch of macaroni and cheese. The recipe included in Lillian's notes will only have a single recipe, and that's what will feed, 6 people easily. But since Lil has lots of friends who like to eat this, we're going to make extra today. So, to start off, we are doing a delayed bake. So we have to make this a little moister, and we're going to undercook the pasta, and we're going to have it ready and refrigerate it, and then bring it to room temperature and bake it later. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to cook this probably at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Anyway, so to get started, panko breadcrumbs, Parmesan Reggiano. What are you going to do with that? Pour it in. Mix them up.
Mix them up.
And don't use the dry stuff that's made by Kraft. Use some real Parmesan Reggiano, or use American Parmesan, but the real stuff that you grate yourself by hand or with a machine. Panko breadcrumbs are just Japanese style breadcrumbs. They're available everywhere these days. I'm sure you all are aware of that.
We should. We grate our Parmesan with this, what is it, micro grater?
Yeah.
It's much faster, much easier. It gets the fine little bits.
Right.
And then, what's next?
Okay, set that aside. That goes on the top later. It's done, basically. Now we're going to make a roux with butter and flour. We've got a preheated Dutch oven over here. We're putting in 8 tablespoons of butter. And when that melts, we're going to add 10 tablespoons of
all-purpose flour.
All-purpose flour.
Which equates to 5/8 of a cup if you measure in large.
Now, this is a roux. When you add flour and a fat together, you're making a roux. When you add to that milk or cream, then you have a bechamel, which you then add flavors to. We're going to add ground mustard, a little salt, and some grated nutmeg. And we're going to add that to the fat, to the roux, not to the bechamel, because especially the nutmeg, the flavor is going to come up, and the mustard should be cooked in the fat. It'll help the flavor and roast those things a little bit better. Okay, this is all done. It's foamed. Dump in the flour. You want to cook the flour for at least a minute, maybe 2. You don't want it to come up. You don't want it to get brown. You're not making a brown roux. You're making a blonde roux. But anyway, this has to cook. And it dissolves. It's not lumpy. And it's nice to use something like this flat-headed whisk to get around the corners of my pan. And in the meantime, Lillian's grating a little nutmeg, but she also needs to open 6 cans of evaporated milk, which we're going to add here shortly after we let's put in your nutmeg. You really don't need any more than that. Right away. Let's put the nutmeg in and get the mustard, and you need 2 teaspoons of mustard. Nutmeg is really strong. You don't want to put too much of it in anything, I don't think, ever.
2 teaspoons of ground mustard.
Right in. And this is kind of, it looks like it's boiling is what I've got it on medium low on my stove here.
It's like bubbling.
And now we're going to add, I think, a couple of tablespoons of hot sauce. What does the recipe say?
It says 4 teaspoons of hot sauce.
4 teaspoons?
Well, I doubled it.
Okay,
So,
good.
which is a tablespoon and 1 teaspoon.
You shake that. We use sriracha. Sriracha has garlic in it, so this it's kind of to me a non-traditional ingredient in mac and cheese, but I like the way this tastes. So does Lil. Lil's a huge fan of Charette.
Who doesn't like sriracha?
Okay. Now we're ready to shake that milk and open it up. This is actually, it looks kind of dry in here now. But I know it's cooking here. The aroma is very sriracha in the kitchen. And we just dump these in one at a time, stirring the whole time. We have to bring this up, not to a boil, but to a pretty high temperature. I don't know what that temperature is, but it's going to be hot enough. It's going to cook the flour and thicken into the bechamel, which is basically just a white sauce.
As it says on the can, you want to shake the evaporated milk well. If you open it on two sides, it'll pour easier. Learned that in kindergarten. Open it up those juice cans.
So I'm keeping the temperature basically at the same place. It's going to take a little while for this to come out. But it's better than scorching the milk on the bottom or burning your sauce. Now we need to add a little salt. We add to our mac and cheese, we add blue cheese to bring up the flavor of the cheese. We use a sharp cheddar and a little bit, just like a quarter cup. In this instance, we're doubling, so half a cup of grated blue cheese. You can use any blue cheese you want. I would not recommend spending a lot of money on your blue cheese. There are a lot of decent American cheeses that have decent flavor for this kind of application. How much did you put in?
2 pinches.
Yeah, put like a half a teaspoon. And the blue cheese is salty, so you don't need as much salt as the recipe indicates. I think it indicates you need a teaspoon at this point. I would not put that much salt in. And once we add the cheese and we taste the sauce, we can figure out if we need more salt. You can always add that later. We got one more. So right now what this looks like, it looks like kind of a, what would you call that, a beige or a little bit browner than a beige. Very, almost white, and it's very milky.
That looks like a chai tea.
Once the temperature comes up enough to get that little bit of flour we added cooked, and as long as we keep whisking so that we keep it spread around, this will thicken and it'll start looking like a gravy. At that point, there will be little wisps of steam coming off. It'll be too hot to keep your finger stuck in it, and we'll turn the heat off and just pour in the cheese. It'll melt, and that'll basically be our sauce. We'll taste it and see what it needs in the way of salt, or maybe more hot sauce, or a little pepper or something. But basically, it's that simple. And in the meantime, we're boiling up enough water to boil 2 pounds of elbow macaroni, which, as I mentioned, we're going to undercook. So this macaroni calls for it to be cooked 7 to 8 minutes for al dente, and we're going to cook it for 6. And what we'll do is save, I think, a cup of extra pasta water, which we'll add back into this sauce after the pasta is done. We'll mix the pasta with the cheese sauce. It'll have that extra moisture. We'll cover it with plastic wrap and put it out on the back porch today because it's cool enough out there to cool it down. And like I said, we'll bake it later. We'll bake it at 350 degrees for, I think, about a half an hour. When you do it this way, you do not put your breadcrumbs on top. If you were just going to throw it right in the oven, when you're done, you mix the cheese with the pasta, put it in your pot pan, cover it with your breadcrumb cheese mixture, your Parmesan mixture, throw it in the 350 oven for about a half an hour. The way we're going to do it, we're going to throw it in the oven, I think, for about a half an hour without the breadcrumbs, and then for the last 15 minutes we'll put the breadcrumbs back. We'll put the breadcrumbs on and put them in the oven, and they'll brown up nicely and they'll be yummy and delicious. What I really like about this recipe, and what everybody seems to like the most, is it's not a dry recipe. The cheese does not curdle and get harder. It's a nice kind of gooey mac and cheese. And what makes it that way is the extra water, I think, the way we do this at the end. And also using a lot of recipes called just for whole milk or any kind of milk, and using, from the recipe I got off of one of the Cook's Country public television cooking shows, they recommend using condensed milk. And I really like the way it works. Besides that, I can always have condensed milk in the house. I don't have to worry about having whole milk around in the refrigerator, which we don't tend to drink a lot of or use a lot. Okay, we're going to turn the camera off now and let this cook for a while, and we'll get back to the process in a minute. Okay, we're back, and our water for the pasta is boiling, so Lil's going to dump the pasta in immediately. I'm starting the timer, and then she needs to add 2 tablespoons of salt to that water and stir. Relatively quickly so it doesn't all clump together in the bottom of the pan. And then that'll come back up to the boil. In the meantime, our sauce is still slowly coming up to temperature. I don't know if you can see, but there is steam rising. It's definitely gotten much hotter. And I would say just momentarily we're going to be able to add the other cheeses. Okay, now would you get a piece of saran wrap and put it on top of the breadcrumb cheese mixture, and then put that on the back porch, because we're not going to need that until way later. And this is boiling, and we're just waiting until the timer goes off. And when it goes off, we're going to grab how much water? I'm going to say 2 cups of cooking water. To add back in, as we talked about, to keep our pasta nice and moist and not overcooked and not mushy. We like a little bit of a bite to that macaroni. I don't have to, just as long as it's moving. Still watery, still milky. I'm tempted to crank up the heat, but I'm not going to, there's no rush. Now we need a colander to actually get that, use that big one up there. I'm worried that one will overflow. Take the insert on. So drain the macaroni when it's done. We're going to run cold water over it to stop the cooking process. It doesn't have to be cold. You don't have to run the water forever, but you just want to drop the temperature so it's warm or room temperature. I want you to be really careful with this because it's going to be heavy and really dangerous to cook.
So Dad already took out the water from the boiling pasta. It's about 2 cups just sitting here.
Right. And I mentioned condensed milk before. I mean evaporated milk. Do not use condensed milk. Okay, so our pasta is ready. Lil will grab this big heavy hot pot and drain it. And like I said, pour cold water over the pasta to stop the cooking process. I'm still happily stirring here. All this timing is working just fine. This is thickening. It's more like a cream, like a heavy cream consistency right now. I'm waiting for it to get a little bit thicker. It's going to almost look ketchup-y in that kind of consistency before we're done here.
How long do I do this?
All in what?
Do I put the
Take your
water?
spoon and stir it and just mix it till the steam stops coming off of it. And then we're going to pour it in our double batch pan, which nothing's been done to prepare it. It just is a nice clean pan. Actually, what I would do is that I pour it in that big pan. You're going to melt my plastic pan there. Pour the pasta back in here, and we'll pour the cheese sauce on it. When it's fine. How hot is it? Can you put? Oh, that pot is hot. Just put a little cold water in it. This has thickened. You want to take a look at this little and see what it looks like? So here's the consistency, if that helps. I might let it go a second longer here. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Since I'm standing right here, and we're just about there, I don't want to see it boiling. Not the cheese in, no. You put the pasta in there and just let it sit. We're going to add the cheese to this off the heat. And then we're going to add the water to the whole thing.
How thick does it have to be?
It has to thicken. So it has to cook that flour. You do not want raw flour because then you're going to get lumpy later. What happens is you coat the flour with the fat, and that will keep it from sticking to itself and from lumpy. The fat being the butter. This is done. Now we take the cheese, dump it all in, one at a time. We'll melt each one. Yeah, this is definitely done. So how long did that take? I don't know, at least 7 or 8 minutes. I don't think it took 20. Did it take 20?
Yeah.
Really?
Between 10 and 20. But it would take less if you were with single batch.
Right. Or I could raise the heat. Okay, so this cheese basically is melting almost upon contact. And this is really thickening this sauce. As you can imagine, it's a cheese sauce. It's no longer a bechamel. It has some color to it now, a little bit more oranginess, but it's still, it's a peachy color. And it's definitely thicker. You want to stir that for a while and feel what that feels like. Hot damn. When that's all done, do you think it's done?
Yeah.
What are we going to do now? Take your pot holders. Hand knitted by my wonderful mother, by the way. Okay, let's tap that. Have to put a plug in for grandma. And that's going to pour on top of these, and then we're going to stir everything. Wait, put it back. Before we do that, we have to add this. So that's this reserved water from the, I'll stir that in, from the pasta. Again, that'll turn your sauce much thinner, but it's still a pretty thick consistency. And once that's all mixed in, you can then take the what was that? Piece of cheese?
Now?
Yep. Right in here. Can you see that? I hope you can, because that's going to show you your consistency. Okay, set it right here. No. Yeah, set it there. Oops. Okay, now we're mixing, and we've got a very soupy. And I'm just going to grab as much as I can out of the pan here of stuff that's stuck. Yeah, it's already mixed. You don't even have to worry about that right now.
Yeah, you can see all that.
Okay, stir that up. And basically, right now we are done but for pouring the finished product, or the mostly finished product. Okay. Keep that. Here we go. See how moist that is? It looks like it's way too wet. Well, I will tell you from experience that pasta is going to soak up almost every bit of that liquid. Come out to a nice, cheesy, soft, cheesy consistency. And if you see, we have just enough room on the top to sprinkle our approximately 2 cups of breadcrumbs later. But right now we're just going to cover this with saran, have the saran touching right on this, put it outside to chill. And we'll bake it later. Hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Alright, so we baked the aluminum covered mac and cheese that we made before and had out on the back porch for 30 minutes. It's hot. Fantastic. Looks yummy. Smells good. It's hot.
Tastes pretty good too.
Yeah. And then you're gonna put that on top.
This is the Parmesan and breadcrumb mix. And you just layer it evenly. Right?
Yeah. You can push a lot of it on. It's gonna work. Not to be that. All right. Back in oven for 20 more minutes, and then we'll turn the video back on, and you can see what the finished product looks like. You ready?
Yeah. So the timer just went off after 20 minutes with the Parmesan and bread crust on the top. It's looking nice and golden brown. Yummy. Smells good.
It's bubbling, which is really an indication that things are right. You can hear it bubble, you can see it around the edges, it's bubbling. You might even step in here for a
Close-up shot.
let me, actually I can just,
I know.
here. Okay,
That's the final product. That's what
wish
you're
you
looking
could
for.
smell it, wish you could taste it.
Yeah. And that's mac and cheese by Marty and Lil.